Hi, I'm Leo Finelli, and you're listening to Generation Change.
For our final episode of 2022, we're sharing a conversation with Rija Nazir. Rija is a Wichita State senior majoring in political science with a minor in Spanish. Rija is a community organizer for Loud Light based in Wichita, Kansas. Rija aims to promote voter education among marginalized Wichitans, as well as encourage accountability among elected officials in Kansas. Prior to the 2022 primary election, Rija led the Vote Nay campaign on behalf of the Kansas Youth Power Coalition to provide accessible election information on social media and incorporated a vibrant Western theme into the pro-choice movement in Kansas. Following graduation in December of 2022, Rija plans to attend law school in the fall of 2023 in hopes to pursue civil rights law through the public interest sector. Rija and I talked about her time at college, her work with the International Rescue Committee, and the power of the youth vote.
Hi, Rija.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing just fine. So, what is Loud Light and what do you do?
Yeah, so Loud Light is a nonpartisan nonprofit that works towards voter education and election information, specifically towards marginalized communities, which can include people of color, like people who are not exposed to election information, obviously, or people who have just never voted before. So anybody who falls into a marginalized status, that is what our organization works towards helping. And so this can include like GOTV or voter registration, which is on pause right now. Anything that works towards helping people learn more about an election or just being a voter in general, that is what our organization works towards.
So, let's drop the pin and tell me a little bit about Wichita, Kansas, where you grew up.
Yeah. So Wichita is the biggest city in Kansas. It's the most populated. And I mean, that's where I was born and raised. And I really love doing work here because there's always something new that you can learn because it is so big. With organizing work, I started like in high school right before the 2016 election because I couldn't vote at the time. And just learning how I could help my city beyond just being a voter was an amazing thing to learn. And there's always someone new that you can meet in the city because it is so big.
The regret of every Gen Zer is that they could not vote in the 2016 election.
Yes. I mean, it was so frustrating because I was 16 at the time. I was a sophomore in high school, and I was like, the one thing that I could do is vote, and I can't even do that yet. And so that kind of frustration is something that a lot of like my peers and I felt because it's like, okay, what can you do beyond this? And that kind of created like movement work within our generation and seeing like, okay, I can't do this, but what can I do instead that is very meaningful and direct, like voting.
And what are some interesting things that you do or can see in Wichita that you've always kind of liked?
Yeah. So, I mean, I started out doing more campaign work with candidates and elected officials, but I kind of stemmed from that and decided to do more work with like immigration, with the International Rescue Committee of Wichita, or when I started with Loud Light, I realized that, there's more meaningful work I can do with helping people learn about their voting rights who are normally rejected by these types of movements. And so realizing that I could help people who looked like me or didn't look like me felt a lot more meaningful than just casting a vote and going about my day. I'm actually South Asian. My parents are from Pakistan. So whether that is helping people from my own community or Black and Brown communities, that's kind of what my focus is helping those people who are historically ignored by candidates or political movements. That is my purpose.
So tell me more about that internship with the International Rescue Committee.
Yeah, so for 6 months, I was an immigration intern. So that kind of helped with getting documents together, kind of filing documents for clients, or just helping anything that my coordinator would need. So that helped me understand different circumstances of immigration or learn about certain stories.
So could you tell me about when you appeared in front of the Kansas State Legislature?
Yeah, so that was during the safe and welcoming hearing. So basically, the purpose of the legislation was to make it a lot easier for law enforcement to deport people, essentially. And so, what we were doing was we had driven to the Capitol and we showed up to one of the committee hearings where they were hearing people giving testimony, or you could give testimony orally or through submitted testimony online. So some of my coworkers and I drove to the Capitol and we gave like a 2 minute spiel of why the committee should have voted no. And that was a very eye-opening experience because normally you see these types of things on the news or through social media and seeing how these things could have been prevented and seeing how you could show up and actually put in that work in person was a very enlightening experience. Even though that piece of legislation did pass, it was interesting to see how different it is to just be there in person to say your piece rather than virtually, which there's obviously nothing wrong with that. But it felt very exhilarating to say something like this directly to these elected officials and to their faces. And so that was a very interesting experience to me and something that I really want to do in the future again. So yeah.
And so you also created the first ever Kansas Youth Advocacy Summit. What was that like?
Yeah, so as a part of the Kansas Youth Power Coalition, Loudlight and a bunch of other organizations were working to boost youth turnout when it comes to civic engagement. But obviously, we had to do this virtually. And so some things that came from it were having one-on-one meetings with legislators and kind of asking them about their future plans and kind of giving our piece of what we're hoping to see in the future. Also, Zoom panels about districting and the redistricting process, and informative sessions like that throughout the week is kind of what our YAS week, which is Youth Advocacy Summit, looked like. And so we're hoping to do something like that again this upcoming year and doing something maybe in person. But it was really great to see young people being told, these are your rights, this is what you can do, and kind of putting that into action and meeting with these elected officials.
So how do you do activism and avoid burnout and or stress?
I think that's kind of impossible. I've definitely experienced burnout and stress through this work, and it's something that is inevitable. Specifically this summer before the Kansas primary, when we were running the Vote Nay campaign, it was an everyday job. Your entire day is spent just feeling out what the current news is, what you're needing to do tomorrow, what you're needing to do next week, next month. And so that kind of agenda on your mind is very tiring, and a constant state of like being busy does lead to burnout. But the great thing about this type of work is the kind of network you build while you're working. And so kind of alleviating that work by handing it off to a fellow organizer or reaching out for help, which is something a lot of us hate doing, but collaborating a lot more and kind of thinking about, hey, I'm not alone. There are people who do this work similar to the way that I do. And so reaching out for help and collaborating a lot more will alleviate some of that stress for you.
Yeah, and what do you think are some misconceptions that older generations have about Gen Z?
Specifically in the advocacy realm, I think a lot of what older generations think is that we stay on the internet and we don't really do anything else. However, a lot of the work that we do and that we do successfully is through digital organizing. And I think a lot of older generations fail to see that a lot of the work that we did, specifically this summer for the election and getting youth turnout, is through social media, through digital organizing, in terms of this type of work that we're doing and combating false information and boosting voter information, voting rights is something that we do all the time. And so what we've seen firsthand is that, you know, having something online is beyond just us being kind of chronically online or lazy, but it kind of combats accessibility issues. Something that a lot of people don't think about is accessibility is a huge part of the work that we do, you know, is something that we're putting out easily accessible to everybody that is anybody who's a follower of us. And so that is also a huge thing that I think a lot of people don't think about.
And you're currently attending Wichita State University. What's it like there?
Yes. So I'm a senior majoring in political science with a minor in Spanish, and I'm graduating this December. It's been kind of a roller coaster just because my freshman year was the only normal year or first semester because COVID started my second semester of freshman year. And since then, it's just kind of been like Zoom university or online classes or kind of like hybrid. And so now that I'm graduating 3.5 years later, it's odd to think, oh, I've been in college this whole time, but it just feels like I've been on my laptop for my classes. So it's quite interesting to go on this unprecedented journey through college.
And what are your plans for after college?
So I am planning on attending law school next fall. I'm applying in these next few months. So fingers crossed. I start law school next fall, and beyond that, I hope to do more civil rights law through public interest.
So, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When I was in New York City 2 months ago, I saw a sign on a building that said, if only 2.8% of elected government leaders are under 30, there's a 97.2% chance that young people's needs come last. Rija is working and organizing to help young people vote for leaders at every level who represent them and care about their needs. One thing I really like about Rija is that she values making change live and in person, as she did when she spoke in front of the Kansas State Legislature. She is not on her screen, she's out in the open. And speaking of getting out in the open, I just launched a Kickstarter project. I'm raising money to make a short film. We'll post a link to the Kickstarter on our social media profiles. Please donate to help me reach my goal. If you'd like to recommend someone you know who is trying to make a difference to be on the show, or if you are someone trying to make a difference and would like to be on the show, email us at generationchange@leofinelli.com. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at GenChangeWithLF. That's at GenChangeWithLF. Follow and review wherever you get your podcasts, and just share this with your friends and others. Generation Change with Leo Finelli is hosted by Leo Finelli, executive produced by Julie Finelli, and edited by Nick and Leo Finelli. Our original music was composed and performed by Leo Finelli. Thank you so much for listening.